So, do you remember we were doing fractions? We were adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing. And so we have more fractions today. So look at that. We're going to solve that today. We're going to solve that. Aren't you excited? We're going to solve that. And it's adding fractions. Do you remember how to add fractions?
Yeah.
What do you have to have? Oh, I hate that. And then remember, we went off to the side and we did x squared over 2 equals, and we did 2x. So remember this? And we had to first figure out what was the common denominator. What's the common denominator with those three? 2, 15, and 10.
30.
30? Yeah. And so then you'd have to figure out what, remember this? What did you multiply? Oh, that was so much work. What if I told you there was a way that you didn't have to get a common denominator? What if I told you there was a way we could get rid of all the fractions? Then you would love me forever, wouldn't you? Wouldn't you, Will? You'd love me forever. He'd love me forever. So guess what? There's a way that we can get rid of all the fractions. The first thing you have to do is ask yourself, what would the common denominator be? You already said it would be 30, right? Well, instead of going over here and figuring out what the equivalent fractions would be, here's the little trick. We're going to multiply both sides by 30 over 1. Whatever the common denominator is, that's what you're going to multiply by. Whatever the common denominator would be, that's what you're going to multiply both sides by. So watch this. Top times top, 30x squared, bottom times bottom. Right? Other side. And when you multiply, you have to do both terms. Top times top, is that 60x? Bottom times bottom, 15 times 1. And then top times top, 30 times 1 is 30. Bottom times bottom, like that. Now, right now it doesn't look very simple. It looks like I made it even worse. But go back now. What is 30 over 2? What is 60 over 15? I think it's 4, right? Mm-hmm. And what is 30 over 10? And look at that. I got rid of all the fractions. Aren't you excited about that? You don't seem too excited. How would you solve this now? If we want to know what x is, get it all to one side, I think. So what will that give us? 15x squared minus 4x minus 3. Now what? Yes, I would say we should factor it. It's either going to be 1 and 15 or 3 and 5. She says 3 and 5. Should we listen? 3x, 5x. This one has to be 1 and 3, which goes where? 3, 1? 1, 3, 1, or 3, 1? Like that? Because this will be 9x. This will be 5x. Signs, it's negative, so I have to have one of each. I think plus, minus. And now that I have it factored, remember, if I multiply and I get an answer of 0, that means one of those things, or both, has to equal 0. So either 3x plus 1 equals 0, or like that. And so then minus 1, 3x equals negative 1. So x equals negative 1/3. And then over here, add 3. And then divide by 5. So x equals 3/5. You get 2 answers there. You see that? So whatever the common denominator is, you multiply both sides by that. Get rid of the fractions. You know, once you multiply and reduce, you shouldn't have any more fractions. Isn't that something? Isn't that cool? Isn't that something? Do you have any questions? I want to do one more just for fun. And because then you won't be able to say, you only did the easy ones on the board. No. Where did I put my blue marker? How can that be? How can that be? Please tell me, how can that be? Is this it? It's got to be. I only had one dark blue. So, one more just for fun. And because, do you see this one has an x minus 2? It's an inequality. It's an inequality. X over 8 minus x minus 2 over 3 greater than or equal to x plus 1 over 6 minus 1. So a couple of things we're going to do first. Do you see over here I just had one term, one term, one term? Now I have an x minus 2 and an x plus 1. Are you going to put parentheses around that? I would. Right off the bat, parentheses, and put a 1 under there. Then you have to figure out what would be the common denominator. I have a 6, a 3, and an 8. What do they all go into? It's not 16.
24.
24? 24. And if by chance you pick something that's too big, it's okay because when you reduce it later on, it'll be all right. It'll reduce down. But 24 over 1. And we're going to multiply every term by 24 over 1. So what do you get? 24x over, and I wish when there's a quantity like that, will you do me a favor and not multiply it out? It's this times this, just leave it. 24x minus 2 over 3. Because then later we're going to reduce that. Don't bother multiplying it out yet. Greater than or equal to, same thing here. When you have a quantity, don't bother multiplying it out yet. Just leave it. What do you get here? 24 over 1. Now we'll go back and reduce. Now we'll go back and reduce 24 over 8, 3x. What's 24 over 3? 8, I think. And by the way, if you multiply it out ahead of time, you're also going to mix up this negative sign. So don't multiply it out till after you reduce. Then we'll go back and distribute that. Same thing on this side. 24 over 6, I think it's 4. And then that one you can't reduce at all. Do you notice now? No fractions. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Rodwa, isn't that a beautiful thing? It's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful. And now you can work this out. First, distribute. Don't forget it's negative 8 times. And it's negative 8 times negative 2 is positive 16. This one's not so bad. 4x, 4. Oh, like terms. I think I have some like terms. What do you get here? Negative 5x. And then I have this plus 16. Greater than or equal to, I have 4x. And this, minus 20 maybe. Get all the x's together. I like to be positive. So see this negative one? I'm going to add 5x. I like to be positive. This goes away. 4 and 5 is 9x. Now that I have all the x's together, get rid of the 20, negative 20. So add 20, and I get 9x, 36, right? So x has to be less than or equal to 4. Make sense? And really, the only new part is this multiplying to get rid of the fractions, right? That's the only new part. Once you get to here, you should know how to solve the rest. Yes? This one you didn't have to factor. It didn't have a square in it. That was nice. But multiply both sides by whatever the common denominator would be, and then reduce it, and you shouldn't have any fractions. If you get to this step where you reduced and you still have a fraction, don't go any farther. That means you did something wrong. I made a mistake, so we'll go back and figure out what you did before you keep going. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Do you want to see about 12 more, or do you think you have it? Do you have questions? Are there any questions? Does anyone have a question? Are there any? Do we have to what? Do we have to what? Meet? No, we're going to keep going with the, let me know if you have questions and I'll help you on Wednesdays. that's all right with you, unless you want to meet on Wednesdays. If I'm holding you back, we can meet on Wednesdays.
No.
I'm not holding you back. No, from being your best self,
No.
reaching your potential.
No.
Well, if I am, you let me know.
Sure.
I'm on 245. I'm on page 245. WE, 1 to 59, the odds. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna have to make a ceiling chart. Oh, you know what? So probably would help if I don't know if this is gonna matter, but Q, C, L, E, 5. That's the Google Classroom code for 5th hour. Not that it matters, I don't think, because they're all the same, but just in case. Rodwa.